Hi, good evening. I'm going to spend a little time this evening reading through this handbook that Jeff Merkley, my senator, gave out at the town hall of his that I went to the other day. It is called Ring the Alarm Bells, the 10 Rules of Trump's Authoritarian Playbook. I had offered to read this in a video the other day, and I realized that it's too long. So I thought, well, it's easier if I just hop on live and read it here, and then maybe if people have thoughts or commentary on it, then y'all can help me work through this. So my Senator Jeff Merkley here in Oregon is a really progressive Democrat, and he's been very outspoken against what the regime is doing. And at his last town hall, he's been traveling around Oregon the last several days, sometimes meeting with members of Congress in his town, doing joint town halls. But the one I went to, my congresswoman wasn't there. And he spoke pretty vigorously about the things that the regime is doing and what we, the American people, need to do. And he had these handouts there. And I just really appreciate that, so many elected officials are really hesitant to use their town hall. First of all, so many elected officials are really hesitant to have town halls at all. And in Oregon, we have all our elected officials, except for Cliff Bentz, who's a Republican in Eastern Oregon, Eastern and Southern. They have town halls, and they're really good about engaging with constituents. Those are supposed to be nonpartisan events. Jeff made some pretty strong partisan statements in his last town hall. And to me, I was really encouraged to see him being willing to use that space to speak out, because we are in a moment where we can't be proper and polite, right? So, okay. I'm just going to read through this, and I will do my best. I don't have any kids with me helping me out tonight, so I will do my best to answer questions. Okay, so this highlights what Jeff Merkley and his staff feel are the 10 rules of Trump's authoritarian playbook. I've always said that authoritarians use a really pretty predictable script, which is why I think it's so frustrating that I'm seeing are the freckles a filter? Yeah, they totally are. I have really bad rosacea. You can't really tell in live, but I have really bad rosacea and the freckles covered up. Yeah, too bad I don't have them. Okay, sorry. So authoritarians use a really predictable playbook, and it's so frustrating to me that we don't really have very much to combat it yet. Like, where are the Democrats with our Project 2029? They don't have a Project 2026, 2029. The Heritage Foundation has planned things way out, and Democrats are just like floundering. They're constantly put on the defensive instead of on the offensive. We need an offense, right? So let me read through this, and y'all can share your thoughts. The 10 rules of Trump's authoritarian playbook. Rule 1, fire the referees. Okay. The first rule of the authoritarian playbook is to fire the referees, the independent federal officials whose job it is to protect the public from corruption, waste, political interference, self-dealing, and fraud. These referees include the career attorneys at the Department of Justice responsible for pursuing nonpartisan equal justice under the law, inspectors general at federal agencies, and members of independent boards and commissions. The carnage at the Department of Justice has tallied more than 200 career attorneys. I saw that something like 6 attorneys just quit because they refused to investigate Renee Good's widow when they were supposed to be, that original probe was supposed to be about investigating Jonathan Ross. And then they were directed to pivot and investigate Renee Good's widow, and 6 members of the Department of Justice quit and said, we're not doing this. Okay. The carnage at the Department of Justice has tallied more than 200 career attorneys, including prosecutors who worked January 6 related cases. On his 4th day back in office, Trump fired 17 inspectors general from major cabinet departments and key agencies. I didn't realize it was 17. That's more than I thought. Many had been replaced by acting inspectors general who were loyal to Trump, right? It's all about replacing effective, legitimate officials with loyalists who are willing to do whatever he wants, right? Incompetent, corrupt, loyal to Trump. This profoundly undermines a check on misconduct within the executive branch. The result is a public and a Congress that are less informed and a government that is far less transparent and accountable. Trump also fired key leaders from a dozen independent agencies and commissions, ranging from the National Labor Relations Board, which protects workers' rights, to the Consumer Products Safety Commission. The NLRB was left without a quorum and unable to operate for most of 2025. On December 18th, the Senate confirmed Trump's nominees on a party line vote, installing an anti-worker partisan board majority. The job of government referees is to identify corruption or incompetence, protecting taxpayer dollars, and improving public trust in our institutions. But Trump fired those referees. Yeah, I think when it comes to the NLRB, it's so frustrating for me because we know that folks who voted for Trump tend to be folks who are not college educated, work blue-collar jobs. Those are the folks who need the protection of the NLRB, right? Republicans have done so much to undermine the labor movement in this country, erode worker rights and protections. And it's so frustrating that people voted against their own self-interest, and the agencies and the inspectors and the officials who are supposed to protect them from government corruption and exploitation, and not just government corruption, but also protect them at their places of work, right? Because what we're seeing now is big corporations, polluters, exploitive employers who are partnering with Donald Trump. And he is eroding worker protection so that they can profit more heavily off of worker exploitation and more unsafe workplaces. So, okay. Rule 1, fire the referees. Yeah, it's not great. It's not great, y'all. Okay, I'm just gonna, give me a second here. Thanks for being patient with me while I block trolls. Okay. Thanks for being patient. All right. Okay. Rule 2, pack the government with loyalists. The second rule in the Authoritarian Playbook is to pack the government with loyalists. When the founders wrote the Constitution, they included the advice and consent clause, requiring that the Senate approve major presidential appointments. As Alexander Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers, number 76, this clause was intended to prevent the appointment of unfit characters. Authoritarian presidents, however, care less about someone's qualifications or character and more about their loyalty. That's why Kash Patel is running that's why a conspiracy theory podcaster is running the FBI in the United States. Okay. Thus, it is the Senate's responsibility to guard against unqualified nominees and insist on competent managers for government departments. But when the Senate becomes a rubber stamp, our republic loses that safeguard, and we have lost it under Trump, right? Because what we've seen is that Republicans are willing to go along with whatever he wants. They are abandoning their position of checking those unfit characters. They're approving all of his nominees, even though they know they're going to do a terrible job. Okay, so 3 examples. Pete Hegseth was confirmed as Secretary of Defense, WikiLeaks Pete, despite a history of alcohol abuse at work and in uniform. Credible accusations of sexual and domestic abuse were levied against him, and a complete lack of experience managing a large organization was a strike against him. He's a Fox News host who's now running the Department of Defense, and he basically told our generals that they need to stop being fatties and shave their beards, right? Like, this guy's, okay. Second example, Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed as the Director of National Intelligence despite having 0 intelligence experience, a history of spreading Russian misinformation, and echoing Kremlin talking points related to Putin's war against Ukraine. In addition, there were serious concerns about her judgment, including her decision to meet with former Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. Yeah, all the best people, right? Yeah. And as I said earlier, okay, third one. Kash Patel was confirmed as the director of the FBI despite having 0 previous leadership experience in law enforcement and a history of statements saying he wanted to use the Bureau to go after Trump's political enemies. He also promised to use the Bureau to release the Epstein files, right? He promised he would do that. Yeah. So part of this is, right, like how a kakistocracy works. Trump wants to put people in, Pam Bondi, everybody else, who will do whatever he wants. They'll break any law for him. They'll do anything that he wants. And that is compounded by the fact that they're utterly incompetent. The fact that they are fucking up the job is part of the plan, right? It's not a quirk, it's a feature. Because he wants to make all of the sort of democratic norms, all of the expectations, all of the rules and proper procedures just completely not work, right? So nobody has the ability to check. Nobody has the ability to use those channels in order to constrain him. So it's not just the fact that they are loyal to him. He intentionally picks people who are incompetent. Yeah. Trump could achieve world peace and cure cancer, and you would still hate him. Has he done any of that? Tell me one good thing that he's done. Yeah. Okay. But DEI is a problem. Yeah, exactly. These are all DEI hires, right? Yeah. These are people who are not competent, but he picked them anyway. Okay, there have been many more. Until this year, nominees have always been considered on an individual basis, but in September, Senate Republicans changed the rules to allow the confirmation of large groups of Trump's nominees with a single vote. By putting those in together, that meant that there might be one or two nominees who they could say were qualified and competent, and then coupled together with them were a bunch of people who were just like absolutely, completely incompetent, ill-equipped and not qualified. And they would just vote them all through, and they would point to the couple who were qualified. So Republicans did that on purpose, right? Republicans have facilitated all of this. I completely agree with Amanda Nelson from Amanda's Mild Takes that what we are experiencing right now is not so much Donald Trump being an authoritarian. What we are experiencing is a failure of Congress to do their job. They are collaborators. They're going along with it. Yeah. I don't know how we get out from that other than massive mobilization of the people voting in the midterms. Yeah. Okay. On October 6th, 2025, 107 nominees were confirmed at once in one vote. With nominees voted on as an entire group, it is very easy for Trump to instill unqualified loyalists in important positions. And Republicans knew that, and they made that conscious choice. John Thune made that conscious choice. How are y'all feeling? That's 2 of them. I got through 2. There's 10 total. Rule 3, demonize the enemy within. The third rule in the authoritarian playbook is to identify and demonize an enemy within. The goal is to divide us versus them so a chief executive can use the power of the state to punish his enemies and tighten his authoritarian grip. Classic move. All autocrats use this move. As Germany descended into an authoritarian state in the 1930s, the Nazis targeted numerous groups, including people of color, people with disabilities, LGBTQ plus people, ethnic groups like the Roma, and of course, Jewish people. Here in the US, Trump has targeted immigrants, saying that they are, kicking my camera here, saying that they are poisoning the blood of our country. He has described immigrants from Latin America as rapists and murderers, and Somali immigrants as, quote, garbage. While saying the U.S. should admit more immigrants from countries like Denmark and Norway. He's backtracked on that, by the way. It's like South Africa, right? I think the only refugees that Trump has let in are white Afrikaners. He slashed the number of refugees in the U.S. while creating a special refuge. Oh, well, see, I was getting ahead of Jeff. While creating a special fast-track process for white South Africans. Trump has also massively increased the power and resources of ICE, which began terrorizing communities by targeting people based on the color of their skin and their accent alone. Trump said he would prioritize the deportation of immigrants who have committed violent acts, but only 5% of those arrested have a violent criminal conviction. Even U.S. citizens have been detained or arrested by ICE. Yeah, someone asked if I'm going to Minneapolis. No, I'm not. That's a whole other question, maybe for another live, about what the responsibility of creators is when it comes to dropping in on communities and how much we are elevating the work that they're doing versus coming in and exploiting them for content, right? So for me, I'll continue to cover stuff locally in Portland. I'm not going to Minneapolis. There are plenty of local folks on the ground who are doing really, really good work there. Yeah. ICE has enough resources like a military of its own. I think ICE is the 15th or 14th largest military in the entire world in terms of funding. It's obscene how much money. Yeah. Okay. In addition, Trump has taken other executive actions targeting minorities, including scrubbing government web pages containing information and resources for LGBTQ plus Americans, firing a number of prominent Black public servants, such as General C.Q. Brown Jr., who served as the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He also made it so that you couldn't get public parks admission on MLK Day. He swapped that out and made it be his birthday instead. That's intentional. Military libraries have removed books on slavery. I reported on this a long time ago, early, maybe March of last year, that the Naval Academy and a number of other military academies took out books from Maya Angelou and a number of other prominent Black authors. That was an intentional choice. Department of Defense officials deleted web pages honoring Black Medal of Honor recipients, Navajo code talkers, and speaking on Black women's history. A Japanese American Army regiment had information about them scrubbed from military websites. A page that was about Jackie Robinson was scrubbed before there was massive public pressure, and they put it back up. Like, they're not subtle, y'all. They're not subtle, right? They're trying to eliminate history. They're trying to remove the presence, particularly of Black Americans, Indigenous Americans, women, and queer Americans. Insane. They removed the Navajo code talker stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, how many Indigenous Americans have been snatched up by ICE? It's a lot. The first group of Native Americans that were abducted by ICE was in January of last year, and they were all Navajo. Yeah. Okay. Rule 4, disregard for due process. The fourth rule in the Authoritarian Playbook is to disregard due process. Due process is the guardian of our freedoms. While it may sound like a fancy legal term, it is the foundation for our justice system, and it protects all of us from being locked up by the whims of a strongman. Without due process, how does anybody know if your rights have been violated? Without due process, they can just do whatever they want, and they don't have to justify themselves, right? Which is what we're seeing now, where ICE is entirely violating the First, Fourth, 14th Amendments. They are violating due process, and they're just abducting people and stuffing them into these facilities, trying to move them around as quickly as they can so that people are denied access to attorneys. Yeah. What time zone am I in? I am on Pacific. So it's 11 o'clock here. It's late, but not super, super late. Thanks, everybody, for being on with me in what I know is like the middle of the night for a lot of y'all. Thank you. Honestly, they're eroding the civil progress of many years. They are. It's going to take us, I think, decades to dig out of this. They have done tremendous damage. Yeah. One of my kids is a history major, and we talk about, before all of this started, he wanted to be an archivist, and he was so upset to see the way that folks from the National Archives have been fired and the way that they are obliterating so much of especially the digital archive of this country. And he got pretty upset about it. And I tried to talk to him, he's 17. And I tried to talk to him about how there will be a post-Trump era. And in that era, we are going to need archivists like crazy. We are going to need people to not only restore all of the things that they have destroyed now, all of the digital book burning that they have done now, but also to archive and record what was done during this time period. So I think that for the youth, there's going to be a lot for them, a lot of work for them to do. Yeah. Okay. No, the deportation order in place is not due process. How do you know if somebody should be deported or not? How do you know whether they're here legally? How do you know whether they have violated any laws that justify their deportation unless they get due process, right? It's the reason that so many, more than a dozen American citizens have been exiled from this country, all of them children, because they were denied due process. All of them are United States citizens born in this country, and the Trump regime exiled them out of the United States because they did not get due process, because they were brown kids. Yeah. Okay. In a republic, people have rights. You have a right to an attorney, a right to a fair trial with evidence and debate. You have a right to a jury of your peers. You have a right to appeal your conviction and to hold law enforcement accountable if they violate your rights. Democratic republics don't have secret police, but now masked federal agents, chicken shit cowards who won't show their faces, Jeff didn't say that, I did, are stalking our streets, brutally arresting people and disappearing them out of the state or out of the country before they can contact a lawyer or family members. I saw an attorney who was in Minneapolis talking on Instagram about how they are trying to get people out of the state in a matter of hours and out of the country within 12 hours so that they have no chance. They have no chance to get representation from an attorney and have due process. They know what they're doing, right? This is hinky shit. They know that they are violating your due process rights. That's intentional. Many people have been wrongly arrested. More than 170 American citizens have wrongly been arrested and detained by ICE, by the way. They don't have a chance to defend themselves because their right to due process has been disregarded. That's true for people here on asylum status, people here with green cards, permanent resident status. The spouses of many military members have been denied their due process rights and deported out of this country. Yeah, okay. In one prominent case, ICE arrested Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has legal status to live and work in the United States. While he was driving his 5-year-old son, who is an American citizen, home in 2025, ICE whisked him away without due process to a notoriously brutal prison. It's a torture gulag in El Salvador, right? The director of CCOT said the only way that you leave is in a coffin. So that tells you what conditions are like inside. They have one of the worst human rights records of any prison. Yeah. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in April. 9. The uber conservative fringe activist six judges ruled against Donald Trump. 9-0. That Trump must facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. But Trump defied that court order for 2 months before returning him to the U.S. The Trump administration imprisoned him twice more after they brought him back before the court secured his freedom just a couple of weeks ago in December. Abrego Garcia has a TikTok account, by the way, which I was thrilled to find. In another case, Customs and Border Protection agents arrested and detained Oregon businesswoman Jackie Merlos in June, along with her 4 young children. This case has not gotten enough press on a national level. This case was horrific. She is in the United States legally, and her children, all 4 of them, are United States citizens. ICE held her 4 American citizen children for 2 weeks in a detention facility. My congresswoman said there were no windows in that room. 4 children, American citizens, were abducted and held by ICE. That detention facility charged the federal government something like $165 per day per child. They profited off of these 4 Americans having their rights violated, held in a windowless cell for 2 weeks. The only reason that Jackie, who was held for a total of 3 months, was released, and the only reason her 4 children were released was because of relentless pressure from Jeff Merkley and Congresswoman Maxine Dexter. Don't believe everything you read. I check my sources. I check my facts. I don't report things that are not verifiable. So she was released after more than 3 months. No charges were ever filed against her because she didn't do anything wrong. These are just 2 examples among thousands, including cases in which U.S. citizens have been detained, but the regime has deliberately disregarded due process. You're gullible, says the person who listens to Christy now. Okay. Rule 5, silence free speech. The 5th rule in the Authoritarian Playbook is to intimidate and silence free speech. I'm going to block this person. Just give me a second here. There we go. Okay. This is a classic, right? It's the chilling of dissent. They want to make you afraid to exercise your federally protected right to free speech. That's what they're doing right now. That's why ICE is telling people they're not allowed to film. That's why they are trying to scare people into submission. Removing the right to free speech happens by making people afraid to exercise their rights. If you don't exercise, lying is actually under freedom of speech. Yeah. You actually can lie unless you are under oath, violating those oaths. Yeah. What am I reading from? Oh, thank you for people coming late. I am reading from this packet from my Senator Jeff Merkley, Ring the Alarm Bells. It is the 10 plays in Donald Trump's Authoritarian Playbook, clearly outlined. So I am on Rule 5. So silencing free speech. The way that the regime takes your rights is that they make you afraid to exercise them. If the fear of what happens when you exercise your rights causes you to no longer exercise your rights, they have essentially taken away that right? Okay. Benjamin Franklin wrote, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of the nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." Shortly after taking office, Secretary of State Marco Rubio started using a 1950s Red Scare law to revoke visas for students expressing their opinions on foreign affairs. He testified that he had deported at least 300 people. This is extraordinary. The law has never been used in this way before, even during the Red Scare, to deport individuals for exercising free speech in America. Okay. Thanks for being patient with me, guys. The students included Mahmoud Khalil of Columbia University. Columbia University was one of the first institutions to bend the knee to Trump, and we could talk about whether or not they actually were forced into submission or whether they are willing collaborators. Okay. Rumeysa Ozturk of Tufts University was the second. These were folks who were targeted for protesting what was happening in Gaza. A chilling use of government power to punish people for their personal opinions. Someone says, Jeff Merkley was amazing. I wish I was in Oregon. Jeff Merkley is amazing. I'm so sorry that you have Josh Hawley and Ann Wagner. I'm so sorry. I do realize that we're really blessed to have Jeff and Ron here in Oregon. I think Jeff is one of probably the most courageous senators. And he also has an incredibly strong moral compass. Yeah, I think Jeff comes down on the right side of history pretty much every time. Okay. Trump has also sought to intimidate the press. As a candidate, he sued CBS News over its editing of an interview with then Vice President Kamala Harris and threatened, if elected, to revoke CBS's broadcasting license. Legal experts largely considered the lawsuit to be without merit, but once Trump won the election, CBS felt compelled to settle. We've seen media organization after media organization surrender, submit, comply. They continue to offer Trump large settlements for lawsuits that they would have won. They just have decided that it is more profitable for them to go along and to collaborate and to bend the knee than to stand up, which is a big difference between Trump's first term and now. We saw far more institutions who were willing to stand up against him during his first term. And part of the reason that we're in this big mess is because too many corporations, institutions have done math very poorly, and they think it will be more profitable for them to go along with fascism. They're doing it because of money. They're doing it because of their giant endowments. They're doing it because of their quarterly earnings, their dividends for their shareholders, right? Which is, it's terrible. It's terrible to think of all of these corporations who are bending the knee and destroying American democracy for money. Yeah. Okay, so it goes on to talk about how CBS settled for $16 million. It's more than that, right? It's more than they just felt compelled to settle. It's that they wanted the Paramount merger, right? They think it's all that grease in the wheel, right? It's all, how do we give Trump what he wants so he creates a situation in which our corporation has even bigger profits? Okay, similarly, ABC paid Trump $15 million to settle a lawsuit Trump filed because a commentator said Trump had been found liable for grape when technically he had been found liable for sexual assault. Only a few months later, following Trump's criticisms of late night hosts Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, the networks acted to remove both of them. CBS canceled Colbert's late night show. ABC suspended Kimmel, but reinstated him after citizens protested by canceling their subscriptions to the streaming service Disney, ABC's owner. That was one of the most successful economic, strategic mass mobilizations that we have seen thus far, and we need to learn how to replicate it in earnest, because what we see right now is that corporations are more afraid of Trump, or they think that they will be more profitable under Trump. They think that going along with what he wants will earn them more money. And we have to show them that it will backfire, that they will lose money, they will lose public support, we will withdraw our funds from them, and it will hurt their stock price, it will hurt them to go along with what he wants. And we haven't done that, I think, sufficiently as of yet. We need to pull those levers in earnest, far more of them. CBS paid him off by settling a suit they'd win. They were going to win it. They absolutely were going to win it. Someone said boycott works. Evelyn, I totally agree. Boycotts require specific demands, large participation, and it has to be sustained. The reason that Disney Plus worked so well is because everybody jumped on board. Immediate huge compliance with the call for people to step up and boycott. And we've got to learn from our successes and continue to replicate them. Trump also slashed funding for public broadcasting, including PBS and NPR, as well as the Voice of America, which was created to counter propaganda from authoritarian governments during the Second World War. Yeah. Okay. Rule 6, steal Congress's power of the purse. The 6th rule of the Authoritarian Playbook is to steal the power of the purse. And before I read this, do you write books? My first time listening to you and really enjoying this exciting analysis. Thank you. I have 2 books that are 3/4 of the way written. One of them is about urban fruit tree cultivation. I have not finished it. And the other one is about feminist homemaking. And I have not finished it because I am too busy now fighting fascism. I don't have time to finish my books, but I would love to get back to them. My very niche book on growing fruit trees in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah. Which like 12 people will read when I actually publish it, but it's going to happen. Eventually, I'll get there. Okay. So this rule 6, steal Congress's power of the purse. I don't know if that's exactly what's happened here, because Republicans have freely handed over the power of the purse. We're seeing Republicans in Congress consistently be collaborators. That's why I say the Republican Party is a fully consolidated fascist party. They're doing whatever Donald Trump wants. And so I don't think it's so much as he's stealing it as they're willingly surrendering, right? The 6th rule is steal the power of the purse. The founders were clear in Article 1 of the Constitution: the power to decide government spending belongs with Congress, not the president. But Trump has repeatedly violated the Constitution and ignored Congress by dismantling federal agencies, Department of Education, USAID. He's trying to dismantle FEMA, right? So, you know what? You have a flood, you have a hurricane, you have a tornado, everything's destroyed, your business, your home. We no longer need FEMA. Figure it out on your own. I got to go golfing. I got to spend $60 million this year of your taxpayer money golfing, and you don't get anything. St. Louis, what happened to them when they had a tornado go through and Donald Trump wouldn't give them FEMA money, right? Okay. Republicans don't question it all. I don't understand how many of them are complicit because they're afraid of losing their seat, because he has some dirt on them that he's holding over their head, or just because they're like full-on fascists and they think that they, like corporations, like Columbia University, like CBS, they think that they'll be more powerful and profitable by going along with what he wants. I don't know how much it's they're craven or they're cowards or both. Anyway, okay. Obama did deport a lot of people. You're not going to see me be a Joe Biden or a Barack Obama stan. You're not going to see me be in favor of any of our president's deportation agendas. So sorry, you thought you had a gotcha, but no. Okay. Trump has repeatedly violated the Constitution by dismantling federal agencies and killing programs, by slow walking, freezing, or impounding federal funds when he did not have the authority to do so. The difference between a republic and an authoritarian state can be summed up in this way. In a republic, the Congress, representing citizens from all parts of the country, decides which programs to fund and how much to spend on them in order to serve the needs of a whole nation, right? We're really diverse. We should not have a homogenous Congress. We should not have elected representatives who all have the same position. I don't actually have a problem with people in a different district electing somebody who's more moderate than my congresswoman, because we are a diverse nation and our representatives should represent us and our interests, right? But they also should represent our rights and the Constitution. So Congress has the power to decide what programs are funded and how much in order to serve all of our needs. Under an authoritarian state, the president alone decides on his whims, and God knows Trump is incredibly impulsive. It really is on his whims, often in a way that rewards his allies or punishes his opponents. That's why I say MAGA is a cult of grievance and retribution and greed. So much of what Trump does and MAGA does is based on punishing opponents and rewarding your allies, right? It's all about that kleptocracy. This is exactly what Donald Trump has done. The president and his team have canceled grants, killed programs, frozen federal funds, cancer research funding. He holds it up. Elon Musk and Donald Trump shut down the U.S. Agency for International Development, triggering the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So this is what I think so far is the greatest crime of this regime. Elon Musk bought himself a position in Doge where he stole all of our private information. There was a report out just this morning that a member of Doge is being charged, I believe, for uploading our social security information and leaking it to people who should not have had access to that stuff. But USAID was gutted, as were a number of other agencies, because Elon Musk was being investigated by them and was likely going to be charged by a number of different agencies. And also because he's a eugenicist and a white supremacist, and USAID helped fund our interests overseas. It helped buy us loyalty and friends, but it also fed and provided necessary medical aid for millions of people, the world's poorest people. And so ending USAID has launched a holocaust, and I use that word intentionally. There was a report that came out about halfway through last year that said Elon Musk illegally gutting USAID is going to kill 14 million people. 14 million people will starve to death and will die from a lack of access to very basic medical necessities and clean water that we provided. Yeah, someone said almost 1 million lost so far. Yeah, almost 1 million people have died. More than 4 million children are going to starve to death because of what Elon Musk did. And I think that I don't want to say preoccupied. It's so hard. We're so focused on what's happening within our borders, defending immigrants, defending our rights, that we can lose sight of the fact that people are dying every single day. Thousands of people are dying every single day because of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I'd rather money for war go to better things. Yeah. One of the things that I think is so heartbreaking about having to pay your taxes, I'm self-employed, so I have to pay quarterly taxes, and I had to pay my quarterlies on the 15th, is knowing that our taxes are no longer going to the things that provide a good quality of life for us. They're just 100% going to corruption and greed and the war machine. And it's just, it's terrible. Yeah. Okay. I get really upset when I talk about USAID. That's the thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else, is thinking about how we could stop it. We could reinstitute that funding at any point in time, and we haven't done it yet. I understand we're all trying to put on our own life preservers right now, so I understand why that's not happening at this moment in time, but little kids are dying. Okay. Trump also defunded the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which protects people from scams, and had returned more than $21 billion to consumers since it was created in 2011. This to me is so telling. Why would the president want to shut down a bureau that protects the American people from scammers? Why is it that he would want to shut down something that is universally good for all of us, but not good for his buddies who are scamming the shit out of everybody, right? Trump canceled billions of dollars for renewable energy programs in blue states, including nearly $500 million in grants for Oregon. A bunch of that money was taken away early last year. It was going to Coos Bay, Oregon. Coos Bay is largely Republican. They voted, I think it's something like 80% for Donald Trump. And he took away a huge amount of money that was going to help revitalize that community. It's really struggling. So many rural communities around this country needed that revitalization money that was going to go toward renewable energy. It was going to go toward improving ports and bridges and so much infrastructure funding. Likewise, Trump took away funding for solar panels, and that really hurt electricians, blue-collar workers who were white in Maine. The state of Maine overwhelmingly voted for Trump. He took away all of their jobs by canceling these clean energy programs. It was good. It was providing jobs to people who really needed it, right? This is what government funding should do. It should help bring jobs and a good quality of life and a bright future to our community, to communities all around the country. And Trump has no interest in having any of us prosper. He has no interest in a good quality of life for any of us. He did all of that because he was pissed that Biden had a good program. I have plenty of criticisms of Biden, but the infrastructure package was really good. Pretty universally for blue and red communities around the country. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading the chat for a second. Okay. When Richard Nixon tried to cancel programs or impound funds, right? Because, would-be authoritarians Strong men do this kind of thing. The U.S. Supreme Court reacted incredibly powerfully, noting that our Constitution invests the power of the purse in the hands of Congress and not the president. The current Supreme Court, however, has failed to defend this constitutional separation of powers. One of the things that was really frustrating for me with Trump's first term, I have never liked Hillary Clinton. I don't like Hillary Clinton. I held my nose and voted for her because I understood the choice was her putting people on the Supreme Court or Donald Trump. And we knew that the Heritage Foundation was planning on continuing to stack the court with their guys and their fringe unitary executive theory that was meant to give monarchical power to the president. And it's so frustrating to know that we could have done differently. And we chose not to, right? The consequences of people not voting or people choosing to be like, Trump couldn't possibly be that bad, and minimizing the harm that was done, that's all playing out now. They have spent decades on this plan, slowly stacking the courts, slowly putting MAGA politicians in Congress and putting MAGA politicians on local and state governments as well. Yeah, no, I didn't want to vote for Hillary. I did it because we have a two-party system, and right, our choices were Hillary, yeah, not great, or Trump. Hillary with no charisma, or Trump, who was like literally a fascist. Okay, so we are in this pickle now, largely because of the Supreme Court, but that's because the voters made different choices, and because the Heritage Foundation is strategic and Democrats fucking aren't. They aren't. Every time you hear the president or a member of his regime say that they canceled a program because it didn't align with their priorities, you are hearing this section of his authoritarian book. Not aligning with his priorities, it's not about his priorities. The American experiment, the Constitution, Congress, it should be about the people's priorities. What works for us? What gives us a good quality of life? What makes us prosperous? It's not about Donald Trump's what priorities, because what he wants is not aligned with what is good for us. Yeah. Okay. Rule 7, cranking through these. If you are joining really late, because I noticed there are some new people, I'm reading through Ring the Alarm Bells. This is my Senator Jeff Merkley's book that he gave to constituents at his town halls, talking about the 10 rules of Trump's authoritarian playbook. And I really like this because not everybody has their library of books that they're reading through, and not everybody wants to get bogged down in all of the details of authoritarians. I do really recommend, if folks have time, to read Timothy Snyder's on tyranny and to read Timothy Snyder's on freedom. They are really digestible and pretty quick reads, and I think that they're really, really helpful. But if you don't have time, this nice little pamphlet, also helpful. Okay, Rule 7. I'm losing it seeing with you. Yeah, I don't really have freckles in real life. Yeah. Abuse. I'm sorry, I'm getting upset. Rule 7, abuse government services. It's hard to read through these. It's hard to face the way that they are using a really predictable script, and who should be the opposition party has not managed to put together a comprehensive script to combat it. There's no playbook for the other side. Okay. The 7th rule in the authoritarian playbook is to abuse government services. Every day, the federal government provides administrative services to citizens. These services, such as licenses, permits, merger approvals, security clearances, are generally provided in a nonpartisan fashion. But since returning to office, Trump has repeatedly abused this power over those services in order to influence or manipulate institutions like networks, law firms, and universities. For example, the federal government has used its authority to approve or deny corporate mergers and broadcast licenses to pressure networks to change their programming, all to please Donald Trump. Like, how fragile do you have to be to say, if you don't do what I like, if you piss me off, I'm going to pull your license to broadcast. If you don't do what I want, it's all about threats and coercion, right? It's all about coercion. Fragile narcissists don't know any other way. He doesn't know how to govern legitimately. He doesn't want to govern legitimately. It's all about coercion. Okay. Trump has canceled national security clearances for major law firms to punish them for their past associations with individuals or cases that threatened his power. This is what we saw with Skadden. This is what we saw with Paul Weiss, the two law firms that bent the knee, that they stood up to Trump in the first term, but they bent the knee this time. They gave him, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars of pro bono legal services for causes that Trump cares about because he threatened to pull their security clearances. Perkins Coie, based in Seattle, they stood up. They said, fuck off, we'll sue you. And they did, and they won. So it's disheartening to see that when law firms could have come together and provided a unified front, that a couple of them buckled right away because they didn't want to lose their security clearances because then they would lose lucrative cases. It's all about money. It comes back to money. What am I reading from? I am reading from, it's okay. No worries if you came late, Linda. I'm reading from Ring the Alarm Bells. This is a handout that my Senator, Jeff Merkley, put together. It's describing the 10 authoritarian plays of Donald Trump's playbook. And I was going to read this in a video, but it's so long that I thought it would be easier to read it on live and answer people's questions as well. Okay. Where was I? Let's see. Give me a second here to find my spot, y'all. Oh, okay. So Donald Trump canceled these national security clearances, or threatened to, in order to dissuade these law firms from using their skills to file lawsuits against him. Part of what's so devastating about Paul Weiss and Skadden is that not only did they offer Trump hundreds of millions of dollars in free legal services, but that is pro bono work they previously would have done for democratic nonprofits, environmental nonprofits. That's all legal services that folks who would attempt to sue the regime to get not just compensation, but restoration of our rights to speak up. And they're no longer able to do that. They were relying on these law firms providing pro bono services. And now all of those services are going to Donald Trump. So it's a double whammy, it's a double blow. Devastating to see, especially Paul Weiss, which is like a big liberal pro-democracy law firm, and they've represented like Hillary Clinton and others, to see them bend the knee immediately. Shame on them, forever shame on them. Okay. Reuters reported in July that big law firms have sharply reduced the number of lawsuits they have filed against the federal government. This is the chilling of dissent. Even those that Trump didn't target directly are now afraid to sue him because they're afraid of losing their security clearance. It's just the threat. He just has to do it to one or two people, and they have to capitulate. And then so many other people are going to be chicken shit cowards, and they're going to fold. Again, all for money. Okay. Trump has also sought to control how universities teach classes and handle student protests. In this case, the government's weapon is research grants. Trump withheld billions of dollars in competitive federal research funding from universities to force them to operate for the president, rather than as the university's leadership would prefer. In October 2025, the White House even sent letters to universities urging them to pledge support for President Trump's political agenda to help ensure access to research funds. So, this is really necessary academic, medical, scientific research. And to see universities fold, Harvard hasn't, Harvard stood up, but to see Columbia, for example, bend the knee immediately because they were going to lose, I think it was $2 billion in grant funding. Do you know how big their endowment is? Columbia's endowment is like $15 billion. So many of these big universities basically operate as hedge funds. And they didn't want to dip into their endowments. They bent the knee to fascism to get their grants restored. They agreed to have government minders put in to like oversee what the deans are doing and what the various academic departments are doing. They did all of that for a couple $2 billion because they don't want to dip into their massive endowments. And it's so terrible. In response to Columbia bending the knee, I think 273 universities and colleges came together and formed an alliance where they said, we agree to pool our resources and not bend the knee. So there was, in response to that, rather than a chilling of dissent, we saw a couple of universities be chicken shit cowards, and then the rest of them came together and said, fuck off. We're going to continue to have academic integrity. And unfortunately, we've seen a number of labs lose their funding nonetheless. And that just hurts science. It hurts medical research. It hurts all of us. It hurts the American people when Trump does this. And we know that authoritarians tend to go for higher education almost immediately, because what happens when you have higher education, you have freedom of thought, people learn critical thinking skills. So it's really common for authoritarians to go for higher ed. It is all about money. It's so frustrating that it's all about money. Okay. Trump has abused other powers too. He abused his emergency powers to impose tariffs, a power that the Constitution gives solely to Congress. He has abused public resources by hanging massive banners with photos of his face off of federal buildings. That's like, how fragile do you have to be? But also like, that's fascist shit, y'all. That's so fascist. By posting political propaganda on nonpartisan federal websites, we can talk about all of the Hatch Act violations that Trump is engaged in. During the government shutdown, like, he just spewed partisan propaganda from official government websites. That's a crime. That's illegal. By planning to use public resources to mint a coin featuring his own face, and by tearing down the East Wing of the White House without any permits on a whim. I don't understand how other people look at those actions and don't see that as like fascist shit. Because it's also like embarrassing. How fragile does how pathetic do you have to be? In order to feel okay, you need to have a coin minted with your face on it, right? Otherwise, you don't feel that you are beloved enough. I don't know about you, but like, I can operate fine without there being a coin with my face on it. But Donald Trump doesn't feel okay unless he abuses public funds to do shit like that. Did you see him steal an athlete's gold medal over the summer while Oh, I did not. No, I did not, Kathy. Yeah, it's the same thing with the Nobel Peace Prize, right? But yeah, let's threaten war against our friend Greenland because we're butthurt that we did nothing to earn a Nobel Peace Prize and we didn't get one. I just like the pure irony of threatening war with our allies because you didn't get a peace prize. It's just... They don't care. MAGAs love dictator Trump. I know. I understand it's a cult. I understand it's a cult and it's nonsensical, but I struggle with it. I struggle to wrap my brain around it. Yeah. Okay. Rule 8. We're getting there, y'all. Weaponize the justice system. This is rule 8, but this was like one of the first things that he did. Okay. Hang on a second. Okay. The 8th rule is weaponize the justice system to punish opponents and reward supporters. You're looking at the probe the DOJ is doing into Governor Tim Walz and what's his name? The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey. You're looking at that. That's exactly what this is. This is a weaponization of the Department of Justice with the malicious prosecutions of Letitia James and James Comey, which were thrown out because they were malicious. Did you see earlier today, Lindsay Halligan got her ass handed to her in court? The judge was like, no, you are not qualified. You were illegally appointed and you absolutely are not allowed to have this position. You do not get to be a prosecutor. You don't get to be, what is it? The I can't remember exactly what position she had. I'll have to look it up. State Attorney General. Yeah. Department of Justice prosecutor. She was like, she'd never tried a case before, and Trump appointed her because she was an extreme loyalist, right? She was willing to prosecute these malicious prosecutions when nobody else would. Decent people are quitting or forcing the regime to fire them. It's all about the incompetent loyalists. But a judge came in and was like, not only are you incompetent, like, you don't have a legal right to have this position. So some places, the courts are really holding the line, and we've got to applaud them for doing the right thing. He's jealous of Obama. Yeah, he absolutely is. If you want to watch Trump get really frazzled, say something nice about Barack Obama or Joe Biden, and he'll just lose his shit, right? That's how fragile narcissists are. They need to be beloved by everybody, and they can't handle it when other people are adored or popular, and they aren't. Yeah. They won't come to their senses out of embarrassment for being conned. Yeah, it is the sunk cost fallacy, I think, for a lot of them. Although I think we should take courage and encouragement in the fact that people in their heads often leave a cult before they visibly are willing to separate, right? People are questioning and doubting, and they're in a community where they have to go along, but in their head, they're like, this is bullshit, right? That's how it was for me leaving the church. There were years where I was like, I don't buy any of this shit, but this is my whole community. These are all my friends. What do I do if I leave? It's going to be really painful. I'm going to lose my support network. I don't want anybody to know that, like, I'm questioning everything, and I'm realizing that it's a bunch of BS. That's how it is, I think, for a lot of MAGA right now. They're unhappy. In fact, in the last week, I've had 4 different friends, 2 very close friends, last week and a half, who've had family members who've said that they're done. They're leaving. I talked about this in a video briefly. The reasons they're different for each person. One was Trump attacking Venezuela. And I think that wasn't because these people are suddenly becoming woke. It's just something about it is a bridge too far. So the Venezuela thing was because so many people who supported Trump were America First people, isolationists, and they wanted Trump. He said he was going to be the president to end all wars, and here he is warmongering. So they're like, well, he's clearly a liar. I don't want him to spend my tax money on this. Maybe they're not mad about what Trump is doing to immigrants. They're not mad about other things that he's doing, but that was a deal breaker for, I think, a lot of people. The second thing is what Trump is doing, warmongering with Greenland. Same thing. The America First people, conservatives, fiscal conservatives, folks who don't want warmongering, they're like, what the hell? He ran on being very much like a protectivist and isolationist. And here he is engaging in wars of aggression that are going to cost us tons of money. Conservatives, Megyn Kelly said this, she didn't want her children to be drafted into Trump's wars of aggression. So there is a point at which people, it's a bridge too far for them. It's a line that they're not willing to cross, and then that fractures it for them, and then they slowly start to deconstruct, but not quickly. They don't suddenly like flip a switch and become like a leftist, right? Not how it happens. The other thing is what ICE is doing in Minnesota. That was the murder of Renee Good. That was something that was the line for one of my friend's moms. And then the last thing that was a line for another friend's family member was the attack on Jerome Powell and the Fed. And that, to me, I think is interesting because it's not really getting enough press, enough attention. But if you're like an upper middle class, if you're like a wealthy dude and you are looking at the way that he's going to F up banking and your 401k, you care about what Trump is trying to do to the Fed. So that's a whole other group of people who are like fiscal conservatives, wealthy bros who saw their taxes go down under Trump, saw their stock portfolios go up. They really care about Jerome Powell and the Fed being effed with. So yeah, okay. Just giving y'all a little bit of hopium in the middle of this. Okay. Weaponizing the justice system. Back to it. Okay. Before Trump returned to office, the Supreme Court found invisible ink in the Constitution saying that the president is above the law. That is, he is permitted to commit crimes without consequences if the crimes are done as an act of federal government, combined with the president's pardon power that effectively puts the entire executive branch and Trump loyalists beyond the reach of the law. The Supreme Court, that ruling has done more to destroy democracy. That was a huge check on his power that the uber conservative six, they knew what they're doing is wrong. They are married to this unitary executive theory. They want to make Trump into a king. And so they were willing to interpret the Constitution in a way that is like, it's way out in left field. If you had asked your average legal scholar 4 or 5 years ago about the unitary executive theory, they'd be like, that's fringe as fuck, right? And now it is the law of the land. Thanks to the Heritage Foundation, thanks to people voting Trump in his first term. Okay. Trump has also appointed loyalist attorneys to the Department of Justice and pushed them to prosecute his political enemies. FBI Director James Comey, who investigated Trump for his collusion in the 26 campaign with Russia. New York State Attorney General Letitia James, who successfully prosecuted the Trump Organization for fraud. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, who said he doesn't believe Trump is fit for office or able to carry out his job. And California Senator Adam Schiff, who led impeachment proceedings against Trump while he was a member of the House. In addition, Trump has pardoned 1,600 people connected to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th that resulted in the death of 5 police officers and injury to more than 150 members of law enforcement. Yeah. Give me a second here. Thanks for being patient with me. Okay. So, yeah, Trump pardoned all these January 6ers, and then we now know that a lot of them have been hired by ICE, including Enrique Tarrio, who should still be in prison. He pardoned the billionaire founder of the cryptocurrency exchange Binance, which had business ties to Trump family cryptocurrency company, the World Liberty Financial. He also pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, the former president of Honduras, a drug kingpin who organized a narcotics superhighway into the U.S. that delivered an estimated 400 tons of cocaine. I'm going to lose this live. I run out of time. Devastating American families. He's abusing his government position to punish his enemies and reward those who are loyal to him. I'm going to crank through these. Rule 9, use the military to suppress dissent. Trump has utilized Title 10 of the U.S. statute to federalize National Guard troops in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Portland, Oregon. He's used a separate authority to send National Guard troops into Washington, D.C. The law says the president can only do this if there is a rebellion or an invasion by a foreign force. There are no other justifications for doing this. But district judges ruled that none of the standards were met in Portland or Chicago for Trump to be able to use the National Guard. In fact, a district court judge found that Trump's argument was untethered to the facts. She was a Trump appointee, by the way. The Supreme Court has now upheld these lower courts' decisions. That's why there are not National Guard troops here in Oregon. But that's not the end of the story. Trump is now threatening to use the Insurrection Act. He's going to use his, not going to, he may use his powers to attempt to deploy U.S. military troops and federalize the National Guard. But he can only do that if there is an insurrection or rebellion. Unlike Title X, this act provides great deference to the president's judgment as to whether or not there is a rebellion. Presidents have been really reluctant to invoke the Insurrection Act in the past, recognizing that the founders greatly feared the possibility of a military force being used against the nation's own citizens in order to suppress dissent and support an authoritarian executive. Our founding fathers were really worried about this. President Trump has talked about using the Insurrection Act over and over and over again. He constantly talks about the enemy from within. That's us, the American people, normal, decent, everyday people. Yeah, he's upset about Sasha Riley spilling the beans. Yeah, he's really afraid of the Epstein files being released. All of this ties back to the fact that he doesn't want the Epstein files being released. He wants to use the military to suppress protests and political dissent and to make us all afraid and to distract, right? Rule number 10, and I might need to do a separate video entirely on this because I'm going to run out of time. Rig the next election. Gerrymandering in Texas and multiple other states. Kicking people off the voter rolls. Trump has tried to subpoena voting records from all of the 50 states because he wants to know what party you're registered with. He wants to know if he should kick you off the voter rolls. Oregon has successfully defended against releasing our voter records, but if you have a Republican Secretary of State, they're just freely handing it over. He's going to kick people off the voter rolls. They're trying to gerrymander, suppress the vote, disenfranchise voters, and then there's a high likelihood that when Republicans lose handily in the midterms, because they're going to get their asses handed to them, that he's going to come in and say, these are not legitimate results, because that's what authoritarians do, right? So we all have to be prepared, I think, for getting a huge turnout the vote movement for the midterms, and then we all have to be prepared to show up in the streets in the millions when they try and claim that they're not legitimate elections, right? Yeah, that's absolutely. Is this from Ring the Alarm? Yes, it is. I'm gonna lose my live here in a second, but this is Ring the Alarm Bells that Jeff Merkley put out. I believe you can email him and get a PDF sent to you by his staff. And I'm not sure if it's up on his website. Really good to understand the plays that Trump is using. Authoritarians use a predictable playbook. These are all things we should have seen coming. Democrats should have seen coming. And unfortunately, there is no comprehensive defense that is going to work because we don't have a majority in Congress. The checks and balances are not working. Republicans are not doing their goddamn job in Congress. They are facilitating what's going on. They are helping it. They're aiding Donald Trump dismantling democracy. And so we all have to be prepared. What will stop this is the power of the people. The way that we move and we act now is what really, really matters. And unfortunately, there's no other easy solution. Chuck Schumer is not going to save us, y'all. It's up to us, the American people, to save us. And part of that is vote in massive numbers. Part of that is mobilizing economic resistance, physical acts of resistance, labor strikes, and also when they try to claim that the legitimate results of the midterms are not legitimate, we've got to be ready. We've got to be ready to move in big ways, big sustained ways, because ultimately the power lies with us, right? There's 340 million of us, and there's a couple hundred of those fuckers. We have all of the power, and right now they're trying to make us afraid to exercise that power. So we come together, call Indivisible. Yes, join Indivisible, get connected with your local grassroots group, whether it's Indivisible, 5051, Surge, whoever it is, get involved, get plugged in. We have to build those connections and those relationships right now because we're going to have to flex a lot of muscles in the coming months. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for letting me grind through that and stumble through my words at almost midnight. I just wanted to make sure I got so many requests to read through this, and thanks for giving me time on live. I know I couldn't do it in a 10-minute video. It took me an hour-long live. Thanks for being here with me late at night. Y'all take care, and I'll be back probably tomorrow.